When it comes to a movie like The Book of Clarence, I never believed that it could stir up so much controversy. So much controversy that actor LaKeith Stanfield and director Jeymes Samuel continue to fight back against the big, scary word, blasphemy. Even producer Jay-Z is experiencing the backlash. But personally, I believe the film had the best intentions, with so much symbolic purpose. And in this video, I'd like to discuss why the film is altering biblical stories, the positive message of this movie, and the powerful symbols all throughout. So we'll discuss this movie in 3 sections: the biblical inspiration, the message, and the symbolism of the Book of Clarence in the spoiler-free analysis. The biblical inspiration. As you may already know, this film is based on the biblical events leading up to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, specifically AD 33 Jerusalem. But as you can very easily see from the trailer and the promotional artwork, the original biblical material is very loosely adapted. Even the writer-director himself, Jeymes Samuel, in an interview with the Breakfast Club radio show, said, "With the Book of Clarence, it's not retelling the pages of the Bible, it's more adding our own pages to the Bible. But the historical inaccuracies and creative liberties aren't for the fun of disrespecting a sacred story, as some people have accused this movie for. There's actually a lot of purpose for the changes. Jeymes Samuel is a deeply faithful Christian. As Samuel describes, he is altering, rearranging, and building on the famous biblical story in order to more heavily highlight the similarities and parallels between the world and people now and the world and people 2,000 years ago. The film uses its modern stylistic changes to tie the classic biblical story together with timeless issues that we all experience today, such as ethnic division, personal identity, resisting temptation, finding one's purpose, and the expression of love. All themes we find in Jesus' story and can find in the Book of Clarence, just with a modern twist, so we can connect in the moment. It also uses its modifications of the original story to critique some ideas Christians have developed over time about how things specifically happened, or the way things looked. A good example of this is the film's criticism on the appearance of Jesus, and what many of us believe he looks like, and why we believe he looks like that. And I'll dive much deeper into that specific detail in the symbolism section a little later in this video. And I guess the most important thing to note in this section is that although this story takes place during the most notable period of Jesus' life, and Jesus is most certainly in this film, this movie is not a movie about Jesus. Jeymes Samuel said it himself. This movie is about Clarence. And let's talk about what Clarence represents in the next section of this video. The message. As mentioned before, the Book of Clarence and the character of Clarence himself is about the everyman, the everyday person, and the moral and psychological challenges that the everyday person goes through, no matter what specific time period they exist in. Because we will always have the same root issues, temptations, and personal obstacles. And Clarence's journey, of course, has many parallels to the journey of Jesus to show us how much more similar to Jesus we can strive to be, even though we are flawed human beings who have sinned time and time again. In other words, and in Samuel's words, every person on this planet, as flawed as they may be, has God within them. And the entire story of the Book of Clarence shows Clarence becoming closer and closer to God in 2 very interesting ways. Here's the first one. Clarence's story begins with a desperate longing for the attention, influence, and power of Jesus. Although he wants to use this power to provide for his family and romantic interest, he's developed a fantasy for the overwhelming excess of riches and status that comes with such power. But as Clarence embarks on this treacherous journey, he develops a strong sense of what truly matters, and what he and his family actually need. Selflessness, gratitude, and faith become so much more important to him, which as a result brings him closer to God. And here's the second way Clarence becomes closer to God. As Clarence transitions from manipulation and lies to selflessness and truth, the events of his own story become visually more and more similar to the story of Jesus leading up to his crucifixion and resurrection. The intentions, the language, and even the imagery around Clarence becomes closer to Jesus, closer to God. Clarence, in his earlier scenes, is also used as a device to present the questions and challenges often presented by non-Christians to Christians. He asks questions about the legitimacy of the Virgin Mary, how Jesus had to have a biological father, and he often brings up the absence of proof for God to exist, claiming it's all dreams and fantasies. But his realizations through his journey guide him towards finding new answers he had never opened his mind to ever before, which ties in perfectly with a super important quote from Clarence actor LaKeith Stanfield during a Hot 97 radio interview. Everybody has a belief, a position, a political stance, a perception about the world. This movie is about perspective, which is saying that your viewpoint is a tiny viewpoint unless it is expanded enough to see all different angles. Knowledge is stronger than belief. And the point he's making here is the faith of someone who has experienced more of life can become so strong that that person knows their God is real. There's so much evidence in their own life, from their own experiences, over such a long period of time, with such a broad perspective, that their belief in God becomes more powerful than belief itself. They feel God within them. And without spoiling this film, let's discuss what specific symbols and characters are used to get this message across in the final section of this video. The symbolism. There was a point I brought up in the first section of this video that I promised to highlight here, and I want to do that now. Probably the most notable criticism by the film on society is the common image of Jesus. In just about every church you go to, at least here in North America, you see many images of Jesus, and in just about every image, Jesus looks like this. A white man with long light brown hair, a thin pointy nose, and sometimes even blue eyes. But according to historians and forensic scientists, since Jesus was a Palestinian Jewish man living in Galilee in the 1st century, he very likely did not look like this. They actually concluded he likely looked a lot more like this. I won't get into spoilers, but the film uses this common image of Jesus in a symbolic way, unlike in any way you have ever seen before. By replicating this image of Jesus and theorizing about how this image of Jesus has evolved and developed into what it is today, the film is challenging us on why we believe he looks like this, and asks us, why should we believe he looks like this? It's also Jeymes Samuel's response to those of us who are offended by the almost all-black cast portraying this classic story. Essentially, Samuel's saying, if you have concerns about the appearance of the cast in this movie, you should also be concerned about the most common modern image of Jesus. Also, Clarence has a twin in this film. He's the twin of one of Jesus' apostles, Thomas. And the symbolism here is that Thomas in the Bible was referred to as a twin, but we can only speculate on who that twin was, or if there even was one. The film takes that liberty, using the character of Clarence to be that twin of Thomas, and the two of them together represent the duality of one human being, struggling with faith, morality, and identity. Clarence, on one hand, is always there for his family, but is materialistic, skeptical, and struggles to seek purpose. Thomas, on the other hand, has found purpose and faith, but has forgotten about those who raised him and where he comes from. The film uses many other biblical figures that are seen in one light to humanize them and maybe capture them in another light, from a different angle, like Mary Magdalene and even Judas and the motivation behind his monumental actions. And finally, I'm sure all of you who have seen the film are concerned about the light bulb. To me, it's a moment of self-discovery, purpose, faith, and knowing God is with you.